What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Wildcat Dash, presented by Dash Sports TV. My name is Jacob Mennuti. I'm joined once again with my co-host Ryan Wall. Ryan, how are we feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Hopefully, we're going to see a season in the next few months.
Well, you might get your wish because there is finally getting some good news regarding the status of college football in the Pac-12. It was reported yesterday that the Pac-12 working group met yesterday to discuss a possible start date for the fall season. I also thought they were supposed to meet today, but I guess that didn't happen. Typical Pac-12, right? But the most interesting news that came out of that was the fact that it sounds like the majority of the program's representatives agreed that the schools could be ready to play football in 6 weeks or even possibly less, is what the report said. So 6 weeks from today is actually Halloween weekend. I think that Saturday is Halloween night. So, I mean, if we get lucky, there's a possibility that we could be watching Pac-12 football on Halloween night. So that, of course, is a big if the Pac-12 could get their act together in time, right? But I want to kick it over to you, Ryan. I mean, what do you think about this? Does 6 weeks sound like a doable thing, or do you still think the Pac-12 is far off?
I believe that's a tad bit too early, but I do believe that the Pac-12 at the very latest will be back by mid-November. Because if you look at the rest of the Power Five schools, they're starting to play week in and week out over the last few weeks, and there hasn't been that many positive cases, if any. So I think Pac-12 football will be back soon, and we'll be watching the Wildcats hopefully on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, first of all, can we take a moment to acknowledge just how ridiculous the Pac-12 looks right now? I mean, they were so committed to this idea of we're not playing any sports in the fall. No zero sports whatsoever, let alone football, right? So just to see them kind of just completely change their direction just after 1 week of all the other conferences playing, it's just so embarrassing for the Pac-12, and it just goes to show just how bad the people who are running the Pac-12 is. But I mean, just to get back to your point, I still think 6 weeks is a tad optimistic in my opinion as well. I mean, and not for the reasons you think, right? Because I don't expect the issue of California and Oregon not allowing its schools to practice or train right now to be an issue because that order is still actually, I don't know. I think they started practicing this week, but I still think they need the order or whatever. I'm not quite sure how the specifics of how that's going, but I don't expect that to be an issue at all just because the NFL and the MLB teams in those states have been playing. They had their opening week last week, and they've been practicing for weeks, and MLB has been going. So I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. But I think an interesting kind of wrench into this whole thing is that 6 weeks is not a lot of time, right? I mean, it sounds like 6 weeks is a long time from now, but to train for football, it's not that long, right? And I think what a lot of people forgot about is that when the Pac-12 shut down their season, they stopped practicing, right? Those teams, some of those players went home. They weren't practicing, right? But what the Big Ten did when they canceled their season, they kept practicing, right? They treated it like it was like training camp, right? So they're ready to go. So that's why I think the Big Ten is more ready to go than the Pac-12 is. So I just don't like this idea of let's just do whatever the Big Ten's doing because the Big Ten's about to play, so why can't we play? The situations are so different, right? Like
Yeah,
they went in one direction and they went in the other direction, right? So I mean, this whole idea of we should just do whatever the Big Ten doing is just so problematic, right? Like the Pac-12 should do what's best for the Pac-12, and I think giving more than 6 weeks to those guys to get ready and to train is probably the best option, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because from a player's standpoint, when they see the SEC, Pac-12, Big 12, Pac-10, Big 10, like all these conferences playing, they get aggravated, and then it leaves the Pac-12 officials like in a difficult situation because like they need to get enough games in for teams possibly be eligible for the playoffs, which the season normally ends late December, setting up the bowl games. So the whole thing is it's a disaster. And like 6 weeks is, yeah, like to go from 0 to 100 in 6 weeks is just not doable. That's why I think they should aim closer towards mid November around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't like how two-faced the conference is being right now. I mean, they say, the whole thing they keep preaching, right, is it's all about the health and safety of the players, right? I've heard that phrase out of their mouth so many times, right? And they say all that, and then they're saying, oh, let's aim for 6 weeks, right? But when the reality is like when you're rushing players back to playing in 6 weeks, you're not saying that their health and safety matters, right? Because guys are going to get hurt if they're trying to rush back into the season, right? Like these guys are not in shape right now. Like some of these teams don't even have all their players on campus right now. So 6 weeks is just not enough time at all. Like the only practicing some of these teams have been doing, if they have been practicing, is just light walkthroughs, right? They haven't been able to get into the training rooms. They haven't been able to meet with the training staff. Like they're just not ready to go. They've only been doing light workouts and they haven't been doing anything real severe. So I don't see a problem at all with just extending that 6 week period into sometime into November, like you said. I mean, the only issue I see with that would be that the college football playoffs would have some issues. But I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, do we really expect any teams from the Pac-12 to be competing in the college football playoffs?
No, we don't actually, and it's just so much confusion. Like back to what you're saying, like they need to pick a date. If they pick a date and say November 15th or that weekend, whatever, just pick a date and we're gonna aim for that date, and then the guys can plan accordingly and practice like to get ready for that date would be better. Because right now everything's just up in the air. Oh, 6 weeks, like in the days, weeks they pass, and like there's just so much confusion. Nobody knows what's going to happen. They need to find a doable plan, and see, maybe give it a few more weeks and see how the other conferences are doing. And I do think it's good if they take they steal some practices from and what other conferences are doing.
And if the college football playoffs is such a big concern, like we want to get going as soon as possible because of the college football playoffs, why not just move the college football playoffs back a few weeks? Like, I don't see why we can't just build their schedule around the Pac-12 and kind of help them get back. If the NCAA really wanted the Pac-12 to be Power 5 and they really wanted them to be included, they should, extend the college football playoffs to include them back in, right? And extending the college football playoffs by a few weeks would not only benefit the Pac-12, but it would benefit the rest of the conference as well. Yeah. Because remember, we're only 1 week into this season, right? I mean, we could still have an outbreak on a team that can cause, a cancellations or postponements of games. So why not have that few weeks of breathing room to, either use that as a bye week or extra time to practice for the big games, or just use them to reschedule those games. Like, I don't see a problem with moving the college football playoffs back a few weeks for the sake of the Pac-12 and the rest of the conferences.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was always thinking that because they want to always shorten the season, shorten everyone's season, but there's no talk of just extending. These are unforeseen circumstances, things that have to get pushed and moved around. So yeah, I don't know why they don't want to do that. There's so many obstacles to pass, and because there's so many different conferences and leaders involved, and it's very difficult to get one solution to work for everyone.
And I mean, I would imagine that, pushing it back would probably screw up some media stuff about, getting their television rights and all that, but I'm sure they can find a way around it. Like, the reality is if the SEC or the ACC was having this problem, the NCAA would have no problems with pushing the college football playoffs back a few weeks. So I don't understand why we should be treating the Pac-12 any differently. I understand their teams are not the same, but like we said, we want to be included into this Power 5 mentality. I don't see why we can't all just help each other out and push it back a few weeks. Because like I said, it's not gonna help just the Pac-12. It's gonna help the entire conference.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, over the last 5 to 6 years when the college football playoff has existed, it's been the same, about four or five teams in it, and the season just won't go on without Oklahoma, Alabama, LSU, any of those teams. That's just the reality.
Yeah, I agree. So let's just say that there is going to be a college football season. It sounds like that is going to happen at this point. How many games do you see Arizona winning? Because it sounds like the season is going to be, let's just somewhere around 6 to 8 games, maybe. Let's just set it at 8 games, right? So they'll likely be playing every team from the Pac-12 South, right, which is ASU, USC, UCLA, Colorado, and Utah, right? And then the remaining 3 games would come from the rest of the teams from the North Division in the Pac-12. So let's just say that they play 8 games. Ryan, how many games do you see Arizona potentially winning?
I have them only winning 2 games. As we discussed in the past shows and weeks, this team just doesn't have enough experienced talent to get the job done against these very talented teams that are better than them. That's just the facts. They have some talent on the offensive end, and that's where Arizona Wildcat fans should be excited to see this season. Guys like Grant Cannell and Gary Brightwell, those are the bright spots. But besides that, they're not winning any more than 3 games.
Bright spot. I see what you did there. I think I think honestly, I think as bad as this team might be, or as they might look on paper, I still see a potential scenario where Arizona can come away with at least 3 or 4 wins. Right? I mean, I know I said on the show a few weeks ago that I didn't expect this team to do anything because of how bad their defense is, and I could still easily see that happening. Right? I mean, that's probably the most realistic option, but I wouldn't necessarily chalk this team down as maybe winning 2 games, right? I think there's a scenario where they could steal a couple games and maybe end up 4-4 in an 8-game season. Because I mean, you look at kind of the state of the Pac-12 and what they're in right now. Guys are going to be rusty, right? Like the offenses and the defenses, they're going to be all over the place. So I think Arizona might be able to get away with having a below average defense just because there's all these teams that are so worried about scheming their offense and they're going to be rusty, and you've got new coaches with their new schemes. And I don't know. I mean, I think you look at their potential schedule, right? You look at the South, and I think UCLA is a pretty winnable game in my opinion. I mean, Arizona beat them last year. I didn't see them really improve from last season into this season too much. I think Colorado is another winnable game in my opinion. Arizona beat them last year as well, and has had a history of beating the crap out of Colorado. I guess that's more of a Khalil Tate thing, but you beat Colorado last year, so you know how to do it. And ASU, in my opinion, is another one of those toss-up games. Just regardless of how good or bad ASU and Arizona is, that's always a toss-up game, right? Just because it's a rivalry game. So you look at those games right there, and Arizona's looking at 2 to 3 possible wins just in that portion of the season. So if Arizona gets a favorable schedule, where they're playing a team like Oregon State or Washington State from the North, I can easily see them maybe scraping together 3 or 4 wins, because I don't think Wazoo is a very good team either, in my opinion. I think having those quarterback issues, I don't even think they have a quarterback on the roster right now that has played any college snaps. So you take that as with their kind of below average defense. I think Arizona could steal a game from them as well. And all those teams that I just mentioned don't have very good defenses. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I think 2 wins is probably more realistic, but I wouldn't necessarily write them down as 2-6. Let's move on, right? Because I think there's some potential in the offense to possibly steal a couple games.
Yeah, I actually don't believe that this season this team should focus on total wins and losses, because like with Corona having like a smaller schedule, and also Kevin Sutherland needs to focus on the player development with these young players and get this group meshing on all cylinders, because like this is a young team, and losing so many guys like on the defense and having the first full season of Grant Cannell, it could be challenging early on, but they're going to have to get through some difficult times, and like hopefully we just see some things we can look forward to in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least the reason why I'm so optimistic is just kind of think Arizona's offense, at least on paper, doesn't look that bad, right? I mean, you talked about meshing together, and a lot of those dudes on this year's offense were there last year, right? I mean, we already know who Grant Cannell is. He's going to be the leading quarterback. He doesn't have to split time with Khalil Tate anymore. We talk about the running back core and how deep they are. I feel like we seriously mention the running back core every week. We should have a tally marker on this show of every week that we mention the running back core. But there are at least 6 players deep at that position as well. The offensive line and the wide receivers, the majority of them are all coming back. So I don't know. I think adding a little bit of experience and chemistry to that team is going to happen. So I can see this offense kind of taking advantage of these subpar defenses, and honestly, on top of that, it's just like the Pac-12 is just infamous for upsets, right? And there's always upsets in the Pac-12 every single year, right? I mean, that's half the reason why we almost never see a Pac-12 team in the college football playoffs, because everyone in the conference just beats up on each other and ruins each other's conference records. So who's to say Arizona just can't randomly beat an Oregon or a Utah, just like just randomly out of the blue? I mean, we saw what happened 2 years ago when Arizona beat Justin Herbert and the Oregon Ducks 2 years ago at home. So I mean, really anything can happen. So
Yeah.
I think I'm being a little optimistic to say that this team has the potential to win 4 games, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, as you said, at like having beat Justin Herbert at home, it's all going to depend on the schedule, the home road schedule, and to see where they play teams. Because as we know, like even last season when they would start off, I believe 4-1, and they lost to Washington at home. Like that, like they had a great first half, and like they had a chance to win that game up until halftime. But so we just got to see how the schedule shakes out, and if it's in our favor, then hopefully the Wildcats can win a few more games than I expect.
You're probably more right than I am, right? I mean, this defense is probably going to hold this team back a lot. I mean, if you thought Arizona's defense was bad last year, they're going to be even worse this year. I mean, the losses of Colin Schooler, Tony Fields, Scotty Young, I mean, they're huge, right? I mean, that trio were top 3 on that team in total tackles last year. I think they had like 250 something total tackles, the combined 3 of them. So I have no idea where that kind of production is going to come from this season. So I mean, you have all those problems, and then you add the new defensive coordinator Paul Rhodes coming in, and he's going to install his new his new defense and his new schemes. So there's going to be a lot of confusion on the defensive side, I think. So I mean, I can easily see this defense just completely holding them back.
Yeah, yeah, having all like those top 3 guys that you said like leaving, like even last year with those guys, like gave up 40 points over 6 times, and that's just it's unacceptable. Like to compete for to win games at the highest level.
So what about the rest of the North teams? I know I just briefly mentioned Oregon State and Washington State. Is there anybody else that you think Arizona might be able to steal a game from?
It's tough. I don't think any team is in the Pac-12 is a gimme for Arizona. I rank us in the bottom 3 probably.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Yeah.
Among,
I don't know if Stanford's beatable, but I mean, I think that might be a toss a game. I don't know. They've had a history of torching us just because our run defense sucks. I think Cal is really good. I don't think we have a chance against Cal. I think they're pretty underrated. Utah is obviously not better than, or excuse, we're not better than Utah. So I don't know. I think, but like I'm saying, like if this schedule plays out favorably for Arizona, I can maybe see them going 4-4. Like if they play Oregon State, Oregon State got a lot better last year coming into this year, but I still maybe seen that being a toss-up game. I think they can beat Wazoo, and I think they can beat UCLA and Colorado as well. So you're looking at 4 potential wins, and then you throw ASU in there as well. So that's 5 games where Arizona has a potential to win. You're looking at maybe 2 to 3 wins at the most or at the least in those 5 games, but I'm not really sure.
yeah, that would be the best case scenario for Kevin Sumlin. But I think with the COVID-19 virus happening, I think that bought him some time with his job security, because after this season, if they go 4-4, next season will be. I believe he's going to be on the hot seat, and that's going to be a do or die year for him. If they don't win 6 or more games and make a bowl game, like I think he's gone 100%.
6 games this year or 6 games next year?
Next year.
Okay.
It's the next full season.
Yeah, I mean, we can go down that road of where Kevin Sumlin is on the hot seat this year and next year, and we can talk about the recruiting class. We've done that before. So we'll move on and talk about our last topic. And so we're talking about, like, if the football season keeps being pushed back as far as it has, right, we should probably expect a few more players to opt out of the season, right? I mean, we've seen a handful of big names from the Pac-12 come out and say that they don't want to play just because, whether it be they don't think the conditions are very safe, they don't think, or they just want to, prepare for the NFL draft, right? So, I mean, Arizona's only had one player up to this point opt out of the season. That's backup quarterback Kevin Doyle. So, I mean, that brings up the question, Ryan, do you think there will be any more players from Arizona deciding to opt out, whether that be because they want to prepare for the NFL draft or they still don't think that the conditions are safe right now?
It's not looking that way because a lot of the players have come out and said, like, through social media that they want to play. They want to get on that field and make some noise this season. And as you said, talking about guys in the NFL, as we know, there's no one really on this roster that's going to make a move in the next year to the NFL. So I think it would be best for a lot of these players, if not all of them, to just build that chemistry, like I said, and to just establish their game. And then later down the line, like a guy like Grant Cannell in the next 2 years, when he's like a junior and a senior, if he stays into his senior year, compete for a Heisman Trophy, because I believe he's a top 15 to 20 quarterback in college football right now.
I mean, yeah, I also don't expect any Arizona players to opt out because they want to prepare for the draft, right? I mean, the guys that have come out and said that they don't want to play and they just want to prepare for the draft, these are like the best dudes in the country, right? Like Walker Little is like the best offensive lineman prospect in the country, right? So he has nothing left to prove. Like everybody on Arizona has something to prove. Like Arizona doesn't have any of those top level guys who are going to go in the first or second round. I don't even think Arizona has any guys on the roster that can get drafted today. So if the draft were tomorrow, I don't see anybody on Arizona's roster that would get drafted. So, I mean, I don't expect anyone to kind of opt out because of the draft, just because they can't afford to skip out of the rest of their college careers to start preparing for the draft, because I don't think they've proven enough. You feel the same way as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, as you saw last season with their two best offensive players, Khalil Tate and J.J. Taylor, they were the whole offense for a few years here in Arizona, and they didn't get drafted. So it wouldn't help anyone on this team to opt out unless they have family issues, like somebody that is has corona or could easily get it or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I think that's where I agree with you as well. I think if players are going to opt out, it's not because they want to prepare for the draft. It's because, they don't feel safe, or, they can't physically come to Tucson or whatever the case may be. Right. I mean, but I also don't really expect that to be a problem anymore, just because, the Pac-12 has those Quidel tests. So they'll be able to test their players daily, and they'll be able to have everybody in one space, being able to, keep them together and hopefully safe. Right. Because, I mean, before there were any games being played, I mean, all of the players opting out were because they didn't feel like the college campuses were a safe environment. I don't feel like that's the case anymore. I feel like from, a few months ago, Arizona or the entire NCAA had no idea what they were doing, right? So, I mean, I completely understand them just being like, oh, I don't think this is the right thing. But now that I feel like we're getting closer to this, there's more of a plan. At least it feels like there's more of a safety plan set in place. So I don't really expect anybody to opt out, whether it be for the NFL draft or because they don't feel safe enough.
Yeah, and that's because a lot of those players from those conferences you mentioned and players that have opted out already, is the conferences acted quickly with trying to come back, not having a set plan. So it could benefit like Arizona's players, because if they have those additional tests and they're waiting to come back, hopefully, because we know the Pac-12 hasn't been the best with their decision making, but we can just hope that they have those tests and everything could go well when they come back.
I mean, you could even make the argument that the Pac-12 is I don't want to say that the Pac-12 is ahead of the other conferences, because they're certainly not. But I mean, once they get going again, I mean, having those daily tests, I think, is just so good, right? Like, I'm not quite sure why other conferences haven't invested in daily testing yet, because I think once the conference starts going and they start having the football season again, I think we'll start to see a lot of success come out of the Pac-12. But then again, I mean, the Pac-12 is the Pac-12, right? I can't expect anything positive to come out of it. But I don't know. I feel like those Quidel tests was a really big step in the right direction. I feel like that was the real turning point for me and to say, okay, maybe the Pac-12 has a little bit of a sense of they know what they're doing. So I don't know. I feel like again, I don't want to say that they're ahead of them, but I think once we start to see the Pac-12 start playing football games again, I think we'll start to see a lot of good things coming out of just because we have those daily tests.
Yeah, I also believe that through in about 4 to 6 weeks, like when they're like mid-season, late season, there's gonna be players that test positive, and that's just what happens. Like there's nothing since no college football program or conference is taking up with like the bubble system. There's nothing they can really do. They can do tests, but when you play different schools, traveling and all that, it's going to be hard to keep up. And I think they're doing their best, and hopefully this can put them in the right direction moving forward.
And I think that's where the daily test is going to be so effective, right? Because they test every single player before the game. If they get a positive test, okay, send him home, right? Like, sure, he may have potentially infected some players on the Arizona team, but now he's not playing in that game against whoever we're playing against and potentially getting them sick. So having those daily tests, I think, is really important because you can nip it in the bud really fast, and you could eliminate that potential to spread it to the other teams.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully we can see a Pac-12 season in the coming weeks/months.
Yeah, well, we all have our fingers crossed. That's our show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Reminder that we are live here every Friday at 4 p.m. So tune in every single week for that. And big news, we also have columns now as part of our collaboration with Sports Pac-12. You can go check out the columns over on sportspac12.com. Our boy Ryan Wall will be writing columns over on that website. So go ahead and check them out. And also check us out as well on our website, www.dashsports.tv, where we post all of our clips and full shows. And also make sure you follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We have it all. So go follow us on those. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.